Hello people, and welcome back to another Cities Skylines tier video. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today we are going to rank all the major expansions, decide which ones we can pass on, which are must-buys, and which fall somewhere in between those two criteria. Before we get started, today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Manscaped were kind enough to hook me up with their Perfect Package 4.0, which includes their brand new 4th generation lawnmower electric waterproof trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, and the Crop Reviver ball toner spray. You can use it in the shower for easy cleanup, and after trying it myself, I can assure you all, I'm now as smooth as an eggshell. If you, or someone you know, has perhaps developed a little too much bush spice recently, Manscaped is the perfect solution to landscape yourself. It's essentially the forest brush mod, but for your body and a real quality of life improvement to your own game. The trimmer itself is cordless and uses a wireless charging system. It has travel lock capabilities, multiple guard length settings so you can customize your shave to your desired length, and has a built-in LED light for a closer, more precise trim, so you can literally shine a light where the sun doesn't shine. For a limited time, you can get all of this plus a free travel bag and anti-chafing boxer briefs by following the link below to get 20% off plus free international shipping using code OVERCHARGED. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring today's video, and to you guys for all support. So let's get started with the DLC ranking, shall we? So as always, these rankings are based on my own personal experience with the game. If you feel I've placed something too high or too low, please do feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I am also excluding the content creator and cosmetic packs, and we may do a separate tier list for those packs if you guys want to see it. But today we are just focusing on the major expansions. So we'll start out and just move through the list here, and I'm going to place Natural Disasters as a passable DLC. Now, it's not that Natural Disasters is a bad expansion, it's just not something that really appeals to my gameplay style. Having to play with natural disasters on, and just having your city constantly at risk of getting smashed by natural disasters isn't something I find fun. This pack could be a lot higher for a lot of people, but for me, it's going to fall into passable. So the Natural Disasters DLC adds 7 disasters that will obviously destroy your city. These are tsunami, tornadoes, thunderstorms, earthquake, sinkholes, forest fires, and a meteor strike. And they will all annihilate your city in some capacity if you play with random disasters on. For me, the thing that makes natural disasters kind of worth picking up, if you've got the spare cash and maybe if it's the last one you're missing, are a lot of the assets that actually come with this pack. A lot of them are very industrial looking and work really nicely from a detailing perspective, like the pumping service asset and the deep space radar, alongside the disaster response unit building. Also, the radio masts and the tank reservoir work really nicely in industrial areas. The earthquake sensors are also really handy for sinking power through into different areas as well, if you don't want to have the power line aesthetic there. So it's quite an aesthetically appealing DLC, but from a gameplay perspective there isn't much there. And some of the unique buildings that come with this DLC are actually some of the best unique buildings, especially the Disaster Memorial and the Pyramid of Safety. Two very distinct unique buildings that are two of my favourite ones as well. But once you've gotten past those first few laughs of watching Sims getting whipped away by tornadoes and swept away by tsunamis, the Natural Disasters DLC doesn't really offer that much going forward. So for me, it's probably the least important and least impressive DLC. But if you're missing it and you just want to have some fun, then it's probably worth getting, but definitely not one of the first ones you should be picking up. Next up, we have Cities Skylines After Dark, which for me is going to fall into a very healthy A tier. With After Dark, we got the ability to specialise our commercial zones into either leisure or tourism, which changes the aesthetic of the asset as well as how the actual zoning works. For example, leisure will attract people at night time and will be open all the way through the night, whereas regular commercial closes. We also got a couple of new transport assets, including the bus station, the international airport and the cargo hub, alongside the introduction of taxis and cycling. And honestly, the inclusion alone of cycling makes this DLC really worth buying. We covered cycling a little more in depth in our public transport tier list, which is linked down below and at the end of the video if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how that works within the city. But cycling, definitely worth getting. Prisons were also added with After Dark, but again, in my experience, prisons, they're good aesthetic assets, but you don't really need them. Police stations will handle the city's crime rate just fine. We also got some really nice new unique buildings with After Dark as well, including the casino, the driving range, the fantastic fountain, the luxury hotel, which can be one of the harder uniques to place because it's such a unique shape, and the regular zoo. And we also got a whole bunch of new parks, which actually help detail our waterfronts with the marinas and the restaurant piers and the jet ski rentals and stuff like that, and the fishing tours. So some new park assets are a really nice addition into this pack, and then some new roads to go along with the new cycling edition, and then also some bus exclusive roads as well. For me, the thing that keeps After Dark out of an absolute must-buy, but still relatively high in the list, is the variation of the tourism and leisure assets. You do get a fair bit of repetition with them, and tourism especially can be really hard to use. A lot of them are quite hideous. And also the functionality of taxis. Again, we covered this in our public transport tier video. You just don't really get that much use, even in a city of nearly 90,000 people like the one that we're in today. Again, it's my personal opinion, but still a really good DLC and definitely worth picking up above some of the other ones on this list. Next up on the Cities Skylines DLC tier list is going to be Campus, and for me, this is going to fall into an absolute must-buy. Absolutely love Campus, and I often see Campus getting, not hate, but maybe a little bit underappreciated. University's pre-Campus DLC were just single assets that look like this, and post-Campus DLC, they now look a little bit like this. So we now zone out our university areas, exactly like we do with our other districts in After Dark and Industries DLC. You get 3 different types of university to choose from, which is the trade school, the liberal arts college, and the university. And there's so many different things you can do with this. This DLC allows you to kind of construct university towns, bring in suburbs around these larger campus areas. Very true to real life. And we also got varsity sports added as well, which adds some really big sports arenas, which again can be used away from campus areas. And one of my favourite things to actually do with Campus is to use the unique buildings. There's kind of 3 with each type of university, so 9 unique buildings in total. Actually using them away from the campus area part of downtown assets. They work really nicely in downtown settings because they're such huge buildings. The Liberal Arts College actually works really nicely in your European areas because of kind of the red mosaic tiles that they have on their roof. So there's a lot of kind of diversity and flexibility with these assets that actually come with the Campus DLC away from their intended purpose. Some of my criticisms of Campus, it isn't a perfect DLC by any means. Getting campuses to level 5 can be really tricky, and especially if you're playing with 9 tiles, either unmodded or on the consoles, you will never need 3 level 5 campuses. The way that the game scales higher education demand with the population numbers, it just doesn't work. So it probably needs rebalancing in that fact. But if you're filling your map with either 25 or the 81 tiles mod, you'll definitely get in a few different types of campus to help satisfy that demand. So that could do with rebalancing ever so slightly. When you hit level 5 of each of the 3 university types, you also get some museums like the Technology Museum, Art Gallery and the Science Centre. And Campus in general is just a great DLC. It breathes in a lot more life into your city. It gives you a lot more flexibility and customizable options with your education facilities. So I really like Campus. Gives you many more options to kind of construct university towns and city centre universities, rather than just placing a single asset and being done with it like it is in the base game. So, my opinion, Campus is an absolute must-buy. Next up, we have Green Cities, and this is going to fall into, again, an absolute must-buy. Green Cities, easily one of my favourite DLCs, and I think a lot of people's favourites as well. Adds in 2 new specialised themes for our districts, including self-sufficient housing, which totally changes the look of residential, and local and organic produce, which again totally changes up the look of our commercial zoning. The difference between the base game residential assets and the Green Cities residential assets is night and day. Green Cities look so much better, and they do consume slightly less power and water, again to tie into their whole Green Cities renewable theme. And the commercial zonings look great, but one of my favourite things to do with them, it gives unmodded players and people without access to the workshop the ability to generate car parks in the city using certain types of zoning under the local and organic produce specialisation in a green pattern. You can get in these mass, very true to life car parks that you will see day to day. Green Cities also brought the IT cluster specialisation, which brought some very much needed height into the office zoning and had some very cool assets and also possibilities for other repeated patterns. We also got a whole bunch of new power options, including the geothermal plant, the ocean thermal energy plant and the solar updraft tower, a new type of bus, a whole bunch of new parks like the community pool and the sports hall, also one new type of elementary school and a new high school and a new university, some new garbage processing options, and some eco water treatment stuff as well. Alongside some very unique green cities themed unique buildings like the Ziggurat Garden and the Bird and Bee Haven, although the lungs of the city still remains one of the hardest ones to place. But in terms of changing the aesthetic look of the game, I would say Green Cities does it the most out of any of the DLCs. There are some great repeated patterns in the residential pool, lots of different themes and vibes with the commercial assets like we've mentioned with the car parks, and also some nice little farmers market stuff as well. Looking on the official wiki for Green Cities as well, the expansion adds 350 new assets into the game, which I think is the most out of any of the DLCs, and that's probably why it makes such an impact in the way it changes our cities, because you're seeing so much new content. And these don't have just to be specific areas either. If you want to, you can make the entire city green, which I think would be quite a fun challenge. Maybe we can do that on the channel to see if we can make an entirely green city with only green cities, specializations and assets. So for me, if you're without green cities, definitely pick it up. They're all super cheap now, and definitely grab Green Cities. One of my faves. Next up on the tier list is going to be mass transit, and this could possibly be the first controversial pick of the list. Mass transit for me is going into C tier. Just give me a second to explain why, okay? Before you start typing. So mass transit does what it says on the tin. It's very much a public transport themed DLC, and it adds ferries, monorails, cable cars and blimps, alongside some new mass transit hubs. The reason why I'm putting it so low is because 2, you could argue possibly 3 of those new methods of public transport are pretty much obsolete and methods that people very rarely use, and also methods that are quite inefficient as well. So we go into more depth on this in our public transport tier video, which again is linked below and at the end of the video if you want to go and check it out why. But ferries are quite underpowered, and if you're in a map without water, are obviously entirely useless. Cable cars, quite specific. Cable cars aren't bad, like they only carry 30 per car, but they're really frequent, so they're quite good in that regard, but they have a very particular key aesthetic. You can't really get away with placing them in certain areas like built up downtowns. And blimps, we all know about blimps. Blimps suck. Blimps are the opposite of 11 secret herbs and spices. Monorail is obviously really good. I ranked monorail in S tier for our public transport. No problem with monorail at all. And the new transport hubs that we got include the monorail bus hub and the multi-platform train stations, the ones on the side and the end of line 1, alongside the train, metro and monorail hub as well. We did also get the addition of the 4-lane and 2-lane highways with mass transit, which in its defence are very useful. Having the optional kind of national road with the 2-lane highways is quite nice. There's also a new type of canal added with mass transit again as well, but haven't really gotten that much use out of the wide canals. Maybe you guys have. And the unique buildings from this pack are okay. The boat museum looks nice on a waterfront. The locomotive horse is a super cute looking asset as well. And the traffic park has its place. So I hope I've explained my thoughts on mass transit well enough there. It could be a fairly controversial choice, you know, but I just think for 3 out of the 4 new methods of public transport added to be either useless or fairly niche, I just think it doesn't deserve to be any higher than that. It's not particularly a bad DLC, but if you're playing with no DLCs and are using this video as something of a buyer's guide, then you can put mass transit towards the back end of your list. So for me, mass transit, it goes into C tier. Next up is going to be industries, and industries for me is going to fall into an absolute must buy. Industries massively overhauls, funnily enough, the industries part of the game. Going from simple zonable assets, you can now generate entire districts based on the themes, including forestry areas, entire farms, ore mines and oil fields. So rather than just being specialized zonable areas like they were in the base game, we now get ploppable assets that all contribute to the level of the industry area. The industries DLC is also one of the best at making money too, especially with the unique factories, which all use the resources produced by your industrial areas. And there's a whole variety. There's car factories, clothing, electronics, food, furniture, petroleum refineries, printing presses, industrial steel plants, plastic factories. There's loads. It's adds so much variety of content into the game. And from a detailing point of view, and to generate a particular aesthetic or a certain vibe in your city, Industries absolutely nails it. One of my favourite things to do with the Industries DLC is to actually build an ore area, and you can build these really impressive mining quarries, have these huge excavator drills. Your farms, you can get all these little crops and pass public transport through them, which gives them a very kind of distinct Japanese vibe. You can use the Industries DLC to decorate the side of your highways by placing the assets correctly, like I've done previously with the sapling fields from the forestry specialization. Just a really good looking DLC, and just improves one of the key aspects of the game so much. There is one major problem with Industries, kind of like Campus, it's not a perfect DLC by any means. It's massively imbalanced, especially with farms. Like, your farms will have absolute backlogs of tractors leaving kind of the farming fields, which if anyone's ever been to a farm in real life, no matter what the farm is, whether it's a rural farm or kind of like an industrial battery farm, there's never this much traffic coming out of them. There is a mod on the workshop that actually rebalances Industries to be more true to life. So if you're on the PC and you want to play with Industries, it's probably worth grabbing that mod at the same time. We also got cargo airports introduced with Industries as well, which are a nice addition to our kind of airfields. You can combine them with the passenger airports to create these kind of larger international airport complexes. The post service was also added with Industries as well, but I've never found post to be massively useful. It's nice to have the service in, but I think it just needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. And the toll booths also came with the free patch with the Industries DLC as well. So they're not actually part of the DLC, but they kind of came with it, if that makes sense. So we'll mention toll booths as part of the Industries DLC. So if you're looking to go from the really basic zoned specialized industries that are in the base game into much more fleshed out industrial complexes, Industries is an absolute must buy and sits really high on the tier list. Again, if you're using this as a buyer's guide, Industries is probably the one you should pick up first. Next on the Cities Skylines DLC tier list is Park Life, and this is going into an absolute must buy. So we've now got 4 in the must buys. And Park Life absolutely deserves its spot here. So Park Life entirely changes the way that parks work in the game. So base game, they were just ploppable assets that you drop on the side of roads, and people will just visit that one specific park. However, Park Life very much works like Industries in the fact that you paint out park areas, and these separate down into 4 different types, which includes an amusement park, a city park, a nature reserve, and a zoo, which all allow for much greater customization with our parks. Take them in various different shapes and sizes, squeeze them into kind of larger areas or tinier areas, take them in L shapes or Zs or big squares, circles, just endless possibilities with Park Life. And Park Life is also home to the infamous Park Life cheese, which is something of a cheesy mechanic. So because when you place down a park gate, Sims will pay an entrance fee into that park. You can place parks in strategic positions to make thousands and thousands a week as people basically pay to cross a road. It's kind of an exploit and hasn't been patched and probably never will be now at this point in the game's life cycle. And similar to Campus, a lot of the Park Life assets can be used away from their intended purpose. A lot of the zoo assets look really nicely kind of placed away from a zoo. And similar with the city park stuff, you can get away with gazebos and little suburbs and some of the amusement park stuff, although usually a little harder to place because of that awful red and white diamond tiles. Can also be used away from an amusement park as well, such as the Ferris wheel on a waterfront, for example. We got some really nice new unique buildings with Park Life, including the Clock Tower, the Old Market Street, the Observation Tower, the Sea Fortress, the Statue of Colossalus, and the City Arch as well, alongside the wonderful Castle Chirpwick, which is pretty much a staple in most of my cities now. The Park Life patch also brought the free update where trees will reduce noise pollution, which is really handy for placing louder looking assets a little bit closer to residential areas. And of course, they brought fences, which we absolutely love. Fences make a huge difference to detailing. Whether or not they're kind of tiny little fractured nature reserve fences, or whether you're running this kind of nice city park fence alongside an arterial road just to decorate it out, fences are great. We love fences. It's also worth mentioning that Industries does have fences as well. Each of the ones that tie into the industrial areas, but they have quite distinct industrial vibes, so they only kind of really work near industrial areas or kind of highways and stuff like that. And of course, lots of new pathways and the wonderful elevated zoo path, which we all adore here. So there's no real downside to park life. If you like playing with Greenbelt and building out these larger park areas and a little bit bored of kind of the base game vanilla assets, then park life is great. Yeah, I would say it's up there with Industries as maybe the first 1 or 2 DLCs that you should pick up. Park life is an absolute must-buy for me. Next up on the tier list is Cities Skylines Snowfall. Now, I really want to put this into passable, but I can't because it introduces trams, so I'm going to put it into C tier, and that's quite a low C tier. In my opinion, Snowfall should have been Cities Skylines Seasons, where it also introduced spring and autumn and summer into the game, and perhaps some kind of gameplay mechanics coming with those seasons as well. Very much how The Sims does in every iteration of The Sims, there's always a seasons expansion, and I feel like Snowfall should have been that. And that's really kind of what brings it down. We do get quite a few new assets with the Snowfall DLC. There's a lot of snow-themed parks and unique buildings, like the ski resorts and the ice hockey arenas, snowman parks, sledding hills, ski lodges. You do get a fair bit of new content. And like I mentioned, the thing that really pulls it up out of a passable tier is the introduction of trams. By far and away, one of the most efficient methods of public transport because they hold 90 per car, but they also look great as well. Trams flowing everywhere, the wires overhead, being able to separate them out onto tram-only tracks and detailing with greenbelt around them. Trams are really good. Snowfall also introduced the heating for your Sims mechanic where you have to use geothermal plants or boiler stations to help keep the city warm. So you have kind of a temperature gameplay loop to keep control of. And the snow will directly affect the roads as well. You have to place snow dumps in order to clear it off the roads. Nothing particularly bad happens if you do get snowy roads, it just slows all the traffic down. But that's it, nothing else apart from that. You also have to factor in a new type of pipe to keep Sims heated, so it's slightly more expensive to place than a water pipe. And there's also, of course, a load of new snow maps, but I feel like they kind of got this wrong. There's 0 colour in the snow maps. And for those following my current snow let's play in our city in Bavaria, we are absolutely starved of colour. Everything is white. So it's kind of, yeah, it is a real drawback of actually playing with a snow map. You do get bored of it. And you also, at least for me, I start to get headaches playing a snow map for a long time because it is just such a relentless white glare on your eyes. It is also worth noting that on the Switch edition of the game, you do get Snowfall and After Dark bundled with the base game if you're playing on the Switch. Not that you should be playing on the Switch because it's like the worst version of the game. So again, if you're using this list as a buyer's guide, Snowfall just for trams. Other than that, it's a little bit underwhelming. It should have been Cities Skylines Seasons. So for that, it's in low C tier for me. And lastly, we have Sunset Harbour, and this is going to go into the currently empty B tier for me. So I've kind of had a little bit of a changing relationship with Sunset Harbour. I wasn't that much of a fan of it when it first came out, and I remember when it was announced and people first played it, it was kind of memed to be a little bit of a Mass Transit 2.0 because it introduced an absolute ton of new public transport hubs. We also had intercity buses added to the game, which I love intercity buses, they're really good. Their assets are really nice too with the intercity bus hubs. Trolley buses also came with Sunset Harbour, and again, one of the less impressive methods of public transport is essentially a bus that just wants its own roads, but again, we cover trolley buses in our public transport tier video if you want to go and check that out. Sunset Harbour also adds the fishing industry into the game, which looks really good, but if you're kind of looking to make money out of your industries, then the industries that are added with the industries DLC are much more efficient at that. Fishing won't make you a vast amount of money, but it is cool to kind of develop these little fishing harbours and be creative with landscaping and keys. We also had a lot of new city service assets introduced, including the waste processing complex and transfer facilities, and a bunch of new water treatment stuff, so you don't have to dump your waste into the water. You can treat it at inland water treatment plants. There's regular versions of these and eco versions of them, which are kind of a less pollutive version. There was only one new unique building added with the Sunset Harbour DLC, which was the Aviation Club, which is like a little mini airport, and that's quite a nice one to use as well. So Sunset Harbour, it kind of falls middle of the road for me. It's kind of a mishmash of the Industries pack and the mass transit kind of molded together with its own unique vibe. It's a bit of a weird one, Sunset Harbour. It's not bad, but it's certainly not amazing, I don't think, at least in my opinion. And one of the best things that actually came from Sunset Harbour, funnily enough, was the free content that was added. It was with the Sunset Harbour patch that we got the ability to use overground metro, which makes a huge difference to the metro method of public transport. Again, covered more in depth in our public transport tier list. And we also got the child healthcare and elder care centres, which boost the birth rate and lifespan of the elders respectively. So that was a nice little addition into some healthcare as well. But those were free updates. They're not part of the DLC. They're just with their patch. Helicopters also came with Sunset Harbour again. And, you know, you kind of feel that intercity buses and helicopters and trolley buses should have been a part of mass transit instead of blimps. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Sunset Harbour, I guess a way to sum it up would be that it kind of feels like all the content that didn't quite make it into Industries and mass transit, they just put it into Sunset Harbour. I don't think that's unfair to say. It's not a bad thing. So for me, it's going to fall middle of the road. Certainly not a must buy. Definitely one you have to pass on. If you've got the spare cash and you want something new to do with fishing, also new methods of public transport, then go and grab Sunset Harbour. Okay guys, that is going to do it for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, likes, comments and shares below really help out my channel. Equally as much if you haven't enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a dislike as well. A huge thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring the video, and if you guys want to do pick up some cool grooming products, don't forget to check out the link below and use my code OVERCHARGED for 20% off and free international shipping. If you want to see yet more Cities Skylines tier lists, please do let me know which ones you want to see down below. And let me know what you think of our DLC tier list. If you think I've put something too high or too low, feel free to agree and disagree, and maybe cover some points that you think I might have excluded that maybe improves the score of one of these packs. And if you would like to pick any of them up, there are links down below to InstantGaming, where all of the DLCs are ridiculously cheap now, and it does help support me directly. I get a little kickback. So if you use the link, thank you very much. But otherwise, I will shut up and I will leave it there. Well, thank you all so much for watching. As always, enjoy the rest of your day.